morning. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to today's keynote address at the 17th Credit Suisse Asian Investment Conference. I'm Lito Camacho. I'm Vice Chairman for Asia Pacific and CEO in Singapore. Today, I am very pleased to welcome His Excellency Luong Minh. He is the 13th Secretary General of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, otherwise known as ASEAN, to our conference. Mr. Minh became the first Vietnamese Secretary General in ASEAN's history at the start of 2013, following an impressive career spanning almost 4 decades in Vietnam's Ministry of Foreign Affairs. As a member of the group of experts of ASEAN Capital Markets Forum myself, it is a particular honor for me to be introducing Mr. Minh. My personal association with ASEAN has really driven home how important it is to the region's economic and cultural development. Established in 1967, ASEAN has grown to 10 members and has a mission to accelerate economic growth, social progress, and cultural development while protecting regional peace and stability. The ASEAN nations have a combined population of approximately 600 million people, or 8.8% of the world's total population, significantly larger than even the European Union. In terms of economic power and growth, as a group, its nominal GDP in 2013 stood at $2.4 trillion, while the IMF expects it to reach nearly $4 trillion by 2018. If the ASEAN countries formed a single entity, it would rank as the 8th largest economy in the world. Today, we will hear from Mr. Minh what progress has been made in ASEAN's path towards improved regional economic integration and what challenges still lie ahead. He will also discuss the priority sectors in the region targeted for this closer integration and which ones stand to benefit the most. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming His Excellency, Mr. Minh.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Vice Chairman, for your introduction of me and the more important of ASEAN that many of us here represent. And Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank Credit Suisse for inviting me to this conference, which has become an important regional forum for discussing global economic and investment issues, and give me the opportunity to share with you what ASEAN has accomplished and still what it hopes to accomplish in regional economic integration and implementing the community building process. On the ASEAN community that we hope to establish by 2015, let me start with a sketch of the ASEAN community and the progress made so far to realize the ASEAN community, which I said we have set the deadline for December 2015. As stated in the ASEAN Charter adopted by the ASEAN leaders back in 2007, ASEAN vision an ASEAN community comprising of 3 pillars: the ASEAN Political Security Community, the ASEAN Economic Community, and the ASEAN Social Cultural Community. In concrete terms, the ASEAN Political Security Community is aimed at creating a cohesive, peaceful, stable, and resilient community with shared values and norms, an outward-looking approach. And the primary goal of the ASEAN Social Cultural Community is to build a people-oriented, people-centered, and socially responsible community and a caring and sharing society, which is inclusive and harmonious for the well-being, livelihood, and welfare of the peoples of association. And the vision of the ASEAN Economic Community is one of deepened and broadened economic integration achieved through existing and new initiatives, and that of a highly competitive single market and production base that promotes equitable development for all members of the association and facilitate the integration into the global community. And to realize this vision, the roadmap for ASEAN community was adopted by the ASEAN leaders in 2009, together with the 3 community blueprints and phase 2 of what in ASEAN we call the work plan for the initiative for ASEAN integration, or the IEI, which is a program aimed at narrowing the gap of development within and among the ASEAN member countries. The ASEAN leaders then adopted the Master Plan on ASEAN Connectivity in 2010. And each of these documents identifies specific action lines, measures, and timeline for their implementation, with a deadline for completion by 2015. And 5 years down the road, since the adoption of the roadmap, and less than 2 years before the deadline of December 2015, ASEAN has implemented about 80% of the measures due under the 3 ASEAN community blueprints. And such implementation has changed fundamentally the landscape of ASEAN in each of the community pillars. Would enhance political cohesion, social responsibility, economic integration, and narrow development gaps, greater physical and institutional connectivity, as well as people-to-people contacts. The standing of ASEAN, both regionally and internationally, has been increasingly consolidated and strengthened. On the establishment of the ASEAN Economic Community, or the AIC, as we call it, by 2015, ASEAN's regional economic integration agenda, although still fairly recent, especially when we compare it with that of the EU, has significantly accelerated in the past decade. The integration of the 10 ASEAN economies into one regional economy, a huge consumer market of 1.2 trillion US dollars, that exceeds even that of India, which is at $938 billion, and compares favorably with that of Brazil, which is 1.8 trillion US dollars, and Russia, 1.3 trillion dollars. This provides greater market opportunities, and diverse as they are, the bonding of the 10 ASEAN economies will also unleash the potential for an economically integrated ASEAN in terms of creating a single market and a single production base that is economically competitive, equitable, and fully integrated into the global economy. And what are the key initiatives to achieve that single market and production base? ASEAN's work on building the AEC is first of all, directed towards the creation of a single market and production base where there is free flow of goods, free flow of services, free flow of investment, and freer flow of capital, and free flow of skilled labor. In undertaking such an ambitious and extremely challenging task, through collective efforts of member states, ASEAN has achieved significant strides in a number of areas in the first 3 phases of the implementation of the AIC blueprint from 2008 to 2013. To facilitate the achievement of the above-mentioned objectives, ASEAN, adhering to the principle of a rule-based system, has achieved economic agreements covering trade in goods and services, investment, and other capital flows, the movement of skilled labor, which as legal framework govern the obligations and rights of member states and set out their commitment in terms of liberalization and facilitation. ASEAN first embarked on these agreements in the late 1970s enhanced, their provisions needed to be updated and keep up with the changing times and help ASEAN achieve deeper integration and build its economic community. Benchmarking against international best practices, ASEAN transformed the Common Effective Preferential Tariff for ASEAN Free Trade Agreement into the ASEAN Trade in Goods Agreement, or the ATGA, the ASEAN Investment Area Agreement, and the ASEAN Investment Guarantee Agreement into the ASEAN Comprehensive Investment Agreement, or the ACA. And taking a more holistic and integrated approach, the ATGA and the ACA are comprehensive in scope, forward-looking, and based on international best practices. ASEAN integration in trade in services was institutionalized through the ASEAN Framework Agreement on Services. 8 packages of liberalization commitments in services have been concluded, while the 9th package is now being finalized. Recognizing the need to further broaden and deepen services integration within ASEAN, as well as ASEAN integration into the global supply chain, work is now ongoing to enhance the ASEAN Framework Agreement on Services by coming up with a new and more comprehensive ASEAN Trade in Services Agreement by the end of 2015. The goal of free flow of skilled labor begins with ASEAN's mutual recognition agreements that will allow practitioners in 7 professional groups to practice more easily in other ASEAN countries through mutual recognition of their credentials. And the ASEAN Agreement on Movement of Natural Persons that aim to facilitate the temporary cross-border movement of people engaged in the conduct of trade in goods, trade in services, and investment. To achieve the goal of freer capital flows, the AIC strengthens ASEAN's capital market development and integration through the adoption of common and streamlined rules, procedures, platforms, and training standards for market professionals that adhere to international best practices, and that allows greater capital mobility through capital account and financial services liberalization. And ASEAN is now working on the 6th package of financial services commitments. And what are the gains we have achieved from this process of ASEAN economic integration? Although challenges remain for ASEAN to address to fully achieve ASEAN's goal of a single market and production base, ASEAN economic integration has brought important gains to the ASEAN member states. And this is reflected in the recent ASEAN Integration Monitoring Report jointly published by the World Bank and the ASEAN Secretariat, as well as in other recent studies on the AEC. For trade in goods, ASEAN member states have made significant progress in almost eliminating ASEAN tariffs on regional trade, which is to less than 1% on average, while also reducing tariffs on trade with other countries. And thus, ASEAN integration has been trade creating, and intra-ASEAN trade expanded. The region's trade with the rest of the world also increased substantially. Regional integration did not divert trade away as efficiencies, and competitiveness in global markets are maintained, and the sophistication of the region export also increased through a wide range of intermediate goods. While the share of intra-ASEAN trade has been stable at 25% of total ASEAN trade, in reality, it represents a high degree of integration when regional trade is compared to global trade to the region. There are also concerted efforts to improve the trade facilitation regime in the region, which has led to greater trade and efficiency gains, and that include lower trade costs. And this in turn has led to an increase in trade flows. However, performance differs substantially from country to country, and trade costs can still be lowered further in a number of ASEAN member states. While ASEAN has made the most progress in terms of tariff reform, ASEAN member states now need to focus on identifying and eliminating the trade barriers elements in their non-tariff measures. And for trade in services, on those subsequent rounds of negotiations, ASEAN continues to broaden the coverage and deepen the level of market access and national treatment across services sectors. Services liberalization has been a very difficult area in the multilateral trade negotiations and the World Trade Organization. And thus, the continuing process of liberalizing negotiations under the ASEAN Framework Agreement on Services has been on the whole productive and facilitative for the region. And the goal of integration in the services sector poses the biggest challenge and at the same time presents the biggest opportunity for the region, given the importance of the services sector, would account for almost half of the region's total GDP. The impact of ASEAN Framework Agreement on Services on intra-ASEAN trade in services and its competitiveness has been fairly limited to this time. Thus, it is important for ASEAN to complete the work on enhancing the agreement by the end of 2015 to truly broaden and deepen services integration within ASEAN to promote the sector's development and competitiveness. And on investment in ASEAN. And recognizing the investment is critical to the region's continued economic growth and development. ASEAN is improving its environment for investors to have greater market access and national treatment. And this is being achieved through the implementation of ASEAN Comprehensive Investment Agreement, which provides for progressive liberalization through the elimination of existing investment restrictions in manufacturing, agriculture, fishery, forestry, and mining, and the services incidental to these sectors. An important provision of the agreement is that it grants immediate benefit to both ASEAN investors and ASEAN-based foreign investors. In the earlier investment agreement, the non-ASEAN investors had to wait for 2020 to benefit from the investment liberalization agreement. The agreement also significantly strengthened investment protection. This is to ensure investors and their investment not only enjoy the benefits of non-discriminatory treatment, but also of investment protection relating to treatment, compensation against drive, transfer of funds, unlawful expropriation, and investor-state dispute, among many other factors. And ASEAN is also striving to ensure transparency, stability, and predictability. Information on scheduling of commitments as well as non-conforming measures under these agreements and the relevant laws, regulations, and guidelines are all publicly available, many of them on the ASEAN website. And there is greater access to information via the ASEAN website, as I mentioned, and the newly created Invest in ASEAN website, which is specifically created for the business community. Based on the investment liberalization commitment under the ASEAN Comprehensive Investment Agreement, most of the ASEAN member states already have relatively liberal investment regimes in the goods sector, especially in manufacturing. To a large extent, the ASEAN member states are well on the way towards relatively free flow of investment. the private sector in the region has noted improvement in investment facilitation and in the overall investment climate in ASEAN member states in recent years. Thus, ASEAN integration has increased the attractiveness of the region to both foreign and ASEAN investors. Foreign direct investment to ASEAN countries increased from $20 billion in 2001 to more than $110 billion in 2012. Within the ASEAN region, FDI flows have also increased markedly from an average of $5 billion in the 1990s to more than $20 billion in 2012. For ASEAN to be truly seen as a single investment area, while the challenge remains to further improve the investment climate in the region, particularly in the ASEAN member states that are still lacking in terms of the quality of overall business and investment environment, as measured, for instance, by the World Bank ease of doing business indicators. And there is still a lot of room for improvement in terms of achieving greater convergence toward international best practices. It is very encouraging to note that there have been significant improvement in the scores of ASEAN member states since the World Bank published the first doing business report in 2003. On where we are in building a competitive economic region and equitable economic development. In striving to build a competitive economic region and equitable economic development, ASEAN has been strengthening the implementation of the pro-competition and the intellectual property rights rules and regulations through information dissemination initiative. Also, there is still much room for improvement. The development gap between the newer member states of ASEAN, meaning Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, and Vietnam, or we call it the CLMV countries, and the ASEAN 6 countries, the original members plus Brunei, has been narrowed during the past decade. CLMV countries have been more forthcoming in their liberalization commitments in services and investment. The remarkable growth during the past 1.5 decades is one of ASEAN's success stories in their growth drivers, all related to the accelerated economic integration within the region and the world. If I may, by 1990, the combined GDP of these 4 new members of ASEAN accounted for merely 3% of the combined GDP of ASEAN at that time. By this time, it has increased to nearly approximately 12%. As I mentioned, also the leaders of ASEAN have adopted a very important work program in ASEAN, which is the Master Plan or ASEAN Connectivity. And by nature, integration is a connection, only that it is not just physical connection. ASEAN community can only thrive and flourish in a well-connected ASEAN region. And this master plan on ASEAN connectivity, adopted in 2010, is aimed at enhancing regional and national physical, institutional, and people-to-people linkages, mobilizing adequate resources to finance ASEAN connectivity projects constitute a formidable challenge. Again, if I may, this work program demands investment of up to $55 to $60 billion a year for 10 years to complete. Putting aside the resources required for institutional and people-to-people connectivity to meet the need for ASEAN infrastructure development, and thus enhancing physical connectivity, it is estimated that the region needs to invest, and as I said, between $550 to $600 billion through 2020. And with such massive financing requirements, a wide variety of sources need to be tapped. In 2011, ASEAN and the ADB launched the $485 million infrastructure fund, with total lending commitment through 2020 is expected to stand at about $4 billion. When private capital is a crucial source of funding, presently the private sector only accounts for about 20% of infrastructure investment in ASEAN. In order to meet funding requirements, ASEAN will need to increase private sector investment, and as such, public-private partnerships are seen as a major modality to implement the ASEAN connectivity projects. If structured properly, the PPPs can help mobilize private sector funding, enable risk to be shared efficiently, and to some extent, enhance private sector innovation in the delivery of infrastructure, assets, and services. As some member states are more experienced and familiar with PPPs than others, it is important to build up knowledge and experience so that all member states are well placed to implement these projects. ASEAN also needs to do more to create favorable environment for PPPs, which in turn will support its connectivity agenda. Collectively, all these efforts will address the infrastructure needs of ASEAN in the region as a whole. On where we are in the integrating ASEAN into the global community, into the global economy. While ASEAN operating in the global economy with interdependent markets and globalized industries, there has been significant progress in integrating ASEAN into the global economy. ASEAN has been in the forefront of integration initiative in East Asia. ASEAN has been in the entry into force of the ASEAN Plus One free trade agreements began with China back in 2005, Korea 2007, Japan 2008, and Australia, New Zealand 2010, and also India in 2010. And preparatory work for a proposed ASEAN-Hong Kong free trade agreement is presently underway. Actually, we have determined that any time in 2014, we shall start negotiation with Hong Kong on a separate ASEAN-Hong Kong FTA. And to further deepen East Asia's economic integration, ASEAN embarked on the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, or the RCEP, with its 6 FTA partners in November 12, with the adoption of the ASEAN framework on RCEP. Negotiations began in May 2013, and having completed 3 rounds of negotiations, the 4th round will take place in China soon. RCEP will consolidate existing ASEAN Plus One FTAs and will seek significant improvement of these agreements in order to create broader and deeper engagement among the participating countries. RCEP brings together economies that accounted for $21.2 trillion worth of GDP in 2012, or up to 28% of the global GDP, and a population of 3.4 billion, or about 47% of global population. In terms of global commerce, RCEP member economies together account for 29% of global goods imports, 28.7% of global goods export in 2012, and 22% of global FDI flows in 2013. RCEP could create the world's largest trading bloc and having significant implications for ASEAN and the world economy. And RCEP represents a very bold and ambitious agenda to enhance economic integration and cooperation within the context of ASEAN centrality in the emerging regional economic architecture. It is very important for ASEAN to maintain the momentum and manage the process effectively and efficiently to ensure that we shall have a successful conclusion of the negotiation by the end of 2015, as we have set that target. So with the challenges, what would be the priorities for 2014? The year ASEAN is under Myanmar's chairmanship. With less than 2 years before the deadline of 2015, with 20% of all the measures due under the AIC blueprint remaining for implementation, what we are able to achieve this year is most important. And in light of that importance, we recognize we have set the following priorities, among the many others, but the major priorities for 2014. First, we need to strengthen regional cooperation for the SME development, SME being the backbone of the ASEAN economies, and a major the item on for cooperation between ASEAN and the major partners of ASEAN. By developing a model for SME credit rating agencies and establishing SME service centers with sub-regional and regional linkages. We need to put into operation the ASEAN framework on equitable economic development, which was adopted in 2011 as the guiding framework for member states to enable regional economic integration based on the principle of inclusive and sustainable growth, poverty alleviation, and narrowing the gap of development within and among the member countries of ASEAN. And also to strengthen the framework on public-private partnership for infrastructure development under the ASEAN Master Plan for ASEAN Connectivity. With confidence that by December 2015, we shall have the AIC in place. Already in ASEAN, we have started the process of developing a vision for ASEAN to continue integration beyond 2015 or post-community period. It is part of the overall vision, which is still to be developed by the high-level task force that we have established. But there has been very broad support at the member states on fundamental elements of such a vision. Overall, it will be a vision ensuring concerted and sustained progress on all the 3 pillars of the community, given the importance we attach to the progress to be achieved on the other 2 pillars of the community. It was when the leaders of ASEAN adopted the roadmap for the ASEAN community, which was a community based on the 3 pillars I had mentioned, that the recognition of the importance of progress on all the 3 pillars were reaffirmed. So while ASEAN is striving to fully implement the measures and the commitments under the AIC blueprint by the end of 2015, much remains to be done in the lead up to and even beyond 2015. 2015 would mark an important milestone for ASEAN. However, regional economic integration is necessary, a dynamic process, as economies and domestic and external environments are constantly evolving. And thus, 2015 also represents the start of a new phase in ASEAN continuing progress towards deeper regional economic integration and community building beyond 2015. The Bandar Seri Begawan Declaration committed to the development of the post-2015 vision that would build upon the achievement of the roadmap for ASEAN community, which has been being implemented for the period 2009-2015. And the high-level task force on the ASEAN Economic integration has decided to form a working group to develop the framework for enhanced ASEAN economic integration for the next 10 years or for the period 2016-2025. And while the vision articulated in the AIC blueprint in 2007 remains relevant, it needs to be updated and refocused to address and manage a number of existing and potential regional and global challenges confronting ASEAN for the AIC to be more relevant and responsive to the changing context. In essence, while we seek to ensure ASEAN's growth and resilience in spite of the global economic volatilities, and looking forward, ASEAN sees itself as continuing its role as the center and facilitator of economic integration in the region and in the global economy. And in particular, the World Economic Center of Gravity has begun and will continue to shift towards Asia, including the rise of China and India as economic superpowers. And this means ASEAN must become a truly seamless economic community in order to achieve a compatible market size and successfully compete as a region in the global economic arena and ensure a more prosperous, dynamic, resilient, and equitable and globally engaged ASEAN community. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, by way of concluding, while there has been significant progress towards the ASEAN Economic Community, we recognize that we also need to address measures that impede cross-border flow of trade and investment, both at the regional and national levels, as well as institutional constraints and physical limitations. While great efforts are needed to build a rule-based regional system, it is necessary to focus on regulatory reform and in strengthening implementation mechanisms and institutions. And greater engagement with all segments of the ASEAN community will also be indispensable. The private sector, such as those that you here today represent, has already contributed to the process by providing greater impetus to the improvement of reform of ASEAN policies, programs, and initiatives. The ASEAN Economic Community will continue to foster public-private sector engagement to improve the coherent transparency and synergies of government policies and business actions across industries and sectors in the ASEAN region. The road to the ASEAN Economic Community has been challenging, but the momentum, and more importantly, the commitment of ASEAN member states remain very strong. In spite of the challenges, as you are aware, at the last ASEAN summits, the 21st and 22nd summit, the ASEAN leaders repeatedly reaffirmed the resolve to have the ASEAN community in place by December 2015. We are also setting the foundation for an inclusive, people-oriented, people-centered ASEAN community, focusing on significantly narrowing the gap of development and raising the quality of life for the peoples of ASEAN. And in this connection, I may also mention that out of the major elements to be included in the vision for ASEAN, for the ASEAN community overall and for the ASEAN Economic Community, there will be a very important target that has been enjoying broad support from member states, that of striving to double the combined GDP of ASEAN by 2030 and halving the number of people living in poverty in ASEAN by 2030. That sets a great goal, and that requires great effort by ASEAN member countries. With the support of the member states and the partners especially from the private sectors. We are confident that we shall achieve the objective. Thank you.
Please. Thank you very much, Mr. Min. It's a wealth of information, in particular in the progress of ASEAN and the challenges and the priorities that you have set, the Secretary General. I guess to a layman, there's been so much hype about 2015, ASEAN Economic Community, and I've been involved in that process myself, but to date, I still don't understand exactly what's supposed to happen at the end of 2015. You talked about the general framework of free movement of goods, free movement of services, capital, and people. At the end of 2015, what would ASEAN have achieved? I mean, what can businessmen and investors expect could be done in 2015 that may not have been possible years before?
Mm-hmm. As I mentioned, the objective of the ASEAN Economic Community is, a region where we will see free flow of goods, free flow of investment, free flow of skilled labor, and free flow of capitals. As a result of the process of integration, especially that which started when we adopted the roadmap for ASEAN Community. And of course, that includes the ASEAN Economic Community. Trade and investment facilitation, for example. Now for the ASEAN 6 countries, meaning the original members of ASEAN, plus Brunei and Darussalam, all the tariff line have up to 98.5% of all the tariff line have brought to zero, while for the CLMV countries, that has been brought down by average to 0.5%. And by 2015, this is, they all be, scheduled to be down to zero, to none, except a few lines allowed to, to be, eliminated later by 2018. And in terms of free flow of investment, with the ASEAN Comprehensive Investment Agreement, you have seen increase in the inter-regional investment, of course also trade, and the gap, not only that within ASEAN countries, but especially between the new member countries of ASEAN and the rest of the members of the association have been reduced substantially. And this is important to ensure not only balanced, equitable, but also sustained progress, but it's very important for the association's process of integration in the long run. And despite all the challenges, by now we have implemented up to 80% of all the measures due under the blueprint. And if you take into account consideration the fact that we started implementation of the blueprint only 5 years ago, and we have 2 years ago, meaning that by average every year, we should be able to implement about 13% of the measures. Then with 20% left for the next 2 years, we are quite confident that we shall achieve the objective of getting the community in place by December 2015. Of course, with the understanding that what remains to be implemented, the 20%, although looking at the percentage, it may not represent a big challenge, but looking at the nature of those very measures, we need to implement now leading to 2015. It is a challenge, given the nature of those measures, which are related to more sensitive sectors of the member states' economy, and those would need greater efforts on the part of member states to implement, especially that from the new members of the association, given the human resource constraint, given the finance constraint, and given the institutional constraints. But as I said also, there is great resolve reaffirmed by the leaders of ASEAN to strive to overcome the challenges, to implement the rest of the measures. and given the understanding that integration is a process, work in progress, that we continue, we are sure that we can have the community in place by 2015.
Thank you very much. So I guess what's clear is if you're a manufacturer from one ASEAN member, by 2015 you could more freely move your goods to other countries without with zero tariff or almost zero tariff. In other areas though, like investments, for example, and I think this is relevant to this audience, it would appear that some countries, in fact, have made it stricter for foreign ownership, smaller limits on foreign ownership and the like. It would seem to go against the ability of free flow of capital within our sub-region of ASEAN. Is there any discussion about getting a special status citizenship for an ASEAN member so that an investor from Thailand can invest in Indonesia without being subjected to the foreign investment limits that would otherwise apply to any other non-ASEAN members?
ASEAN integration is taking place at different levels. It may be at at the level of agreements between individual ASEAN countries and other countries and organizations, and at taking place at the level of agreements between ASEAN and other partners of ASEAN. Maybe countries or regional organizations. And you can imagine that, by 2015, besides the ASEAN Economic Community, we shall have also the ASEP. I mentioned also that the deadline has been set for 2015 for the completion of the negotiations. So by 2015, we have the AIC, we have the ASEP, and we shall have a much wider East Asian context for investment, for trade, and for economic cooperation, not only among ASEAN countries, but among the countries of the Asia, East Asian region. And also this year, we will start negotiations on a separate ASEAN Hong Kong FTA. So that will complete the East Asian the context for investment, trade, and economic cooperation. But the point you raised, that's why I said that, if looking at the percentage, it does not represent a challenge. But looking at the nature of the remaining measures, it is. And we need to overcome, focusing on the importance of, striving to implement those measures, conducive to the promotion of shared interests. And that's the essence of the process of ASEAN integration.
Thank you, Minister. I'm really afraid and apologize because we're running out of time. I would like to maybe allow for one question, one short question from the audience, if I may. Yes, please.
ASEAN is growing together. At the same time, many of the ASEAN countries at the moment, they are negotiating on their own free trade agreements. I address here particularly the American Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is more than just kind of a free trade agreement. It goes very far in terms of harmonizing kind of norms, etc. Do you think there is an inherent conflict of interest between ASEAN members who are negotiating around with TPP and the integration of ASEAN itself?
No, as I said, ASEAN's process of integration is taking place at different levels. Let's say that between ASEAN and external parties, by 2015, beside the AEC, we shall have the ASEP. And we are starting with Hong Kong, a separate ASEAN Hong Kong FTA. And also by 2015, we shall resume negotiation with the EU on an ASEAN EU FTA. And for countries of ASEAN negotiating, the TPP, in ASEAN we consider all these as mutually complementary processes, one not negating the others, and the integration of any member state into the region and the world is conducive to the integration of the whole group into the region and the world.
Thank you very much, Minister Min. On that note, I'm afraid we've run out of time. I think it's at least we're ending on a positive note, so there's no conflict between ASEAN and all these other discussions around bilaterals and multilateral trade agreements. Mr. Min, thank you very much for your time, your generous sharing of what's going on in ASEAN. Thank you very much for attending this session.